How do you know he wasn't telling the truth about sacrificing the heifer? Or, sacrificing the heifer. Did he have to tell everything he was going to do? And he doesn't respond. But if you read 1 Samuel 16, 1 through 5, you will see that the heifer was used as a sacrifice. Are you trying to say that in order to not lie, or, quote, to bear false witness, unquote, you need to tell your enemies all of God's plans? Remember, this wasn't Samuel's plan, it was God's. Are you calling God a liar here? So how can you say Samuel is oblivious when he is well aware of his true purpose and anointing? He is told to say otherwise, and then informs that what was actually going to take place was an anointing, not a sacrifice. He was fully briefed as to what was to take place, and it's the only way this can be read. Unless you say that God himself deceived Samuel, I still don't see how this. I still don't see how this is lying or bearing false witness. Doesn't respond. It seems to pale greatly in significance to, quote, war is deceit, and Quran 3:28 and 16:106, plus, quote, we smile in the face of some people while inwardly we curse those same people. He doesn't respond. Especially if he does sacrifice the heifer. Again, how does not telling someone everything you have planned mean you are lying or, quote, bearing false witness? Read the text. As soon as they come, he picks David and leaves. No sacrifice ever takes place. Don't try to add the parts that aren't there. Had he sacrificed it, it would have said so. Read the sequence of events. He invites them to a sacrifice. As soon as they arrive, he instead anoints David. No sacrifice. In 1 Samuel 16, 1 through 3, God tells Samuel what to do, which is sacrifice a heifer. Tells him to sacrifice a heifer. In the very next verse it says, and Samuel did that which the Lord spake. Where does it say he didn't sacrifice a heifer? In verse 5, Samuel calls people to the sacrifice. Where does it say he didn't sacrifice the heifer? Are you not trying to twist the scriptures to make God a liar so Islam will get a free pass for its lying and deceit, its war's deceit? No, God tells him to say he has come to sacrifice. There isn't a single verse that has him doing so. What does, quote, calling them to the sacrifice mean to you? You have to take it exactly as is presented. Never is he told to actually do it. And never is he presented as doing so. You are only assuming as much. No, you are trying to say that God is either lying or deceitful with a non-existent sacrifice. I didn't read it close enough at first, but studied further and discovered that I was wrong about the heifer possibly being sacrificed any day. To me, it's clear now, thanks to you, that it was sacrificed during the time of the anointing with the call to sacrifice. Remember, it says, quote, it says in 1 Samuel 16:5, quote, and call them to the sacrifice, unquote. So unless you can provide the verse where God in fact tells him to sacrifice the heifer, rather than just say it to full self, and unless you can provide a verse showing Samuel actually doing the sacrifice, the text must be left alone, and you must stick to the sequence given. He is told to say it. He anoints David and leaves. The story is a sacrifice free. What does, quote, and he sanctified Jesse and his sons and called them to the sacrifice, unquote. What does that mean to you? What sacrifice if there was no sacrifice in 1 Samuel 16 verse 5? what are you talking about? How easy is it to say, quote, hey, come to the sacrifice, unquote. Whether there is one or not. He told them it was a sacrifice. You can't say he invited them to the anointing, because he hid the fact that he was really that it was really an anointing. They were told they were going to a sacrifice. But where in these verses does a sacrifice take place? Where? Well, where does it say there was no sacrifice? Had there been an actual sacrifice, God would have said, quote, go sacrifice and invite them. Not, quote, say I have come to sacrifice to the Lord, unquote. Why is it the second way? If Samuel, quote, did as the Lord said, unquote, exactly as it seems, there is no actual sacrifice. Only the words, where does it say he in fact took his blade to the neck of the cow and sacrificed it? It doesn't. If these verses are taken as literal, without adding from opinion as you have, it contains no actual sacrifice. And see, God doesn't tell Samuel to sacrifice, just anoint. God doesn't tell Samuel to sacrifice, just anoint. Read it again, please. God told him to say he was coming to sacrifice a cow when he really wasn't. He knew it. What's so unclear here? But he did come to sacrifice a cow, and that is a heifer. And show me where the heifer isn't sacrificed like you are saying. Sure, he anointed. But he also, quote, did what the Lord spake, unquote, which was sacrifice a heifer. Again, where do you read that he didn't sacrifice a heifer? What does, quote, call them to the sacrifice, unquote, in verse 5 mean to you? Sure you aren't trying to make my God a liar to excuse your God that has Quran 3:28 and 16:106 along with, quote, war's deceit? He doesn't respond. You say it was only to anoint, but if you read it, you see that Samuel did all that God had told him, meaning that he did sacrifice the heifer. Did Samuel have to tell his enemies that he was to anoint also? How is this lying if he doesn't tell them? Why does it say that he sacrificed the heifer? You have to stick to the sequence of events without addition. Where does God tell him to actually sacrifice it? And where does he say so? What verse? What does, quote, well, I'll tell you, what does, quote, and he sanctified Jesse and his sons and called them to sacrifice. What does that mean to you? What sacrifice? If there was no sacrifice in 1 Samuel 16, verse 5. So what of that? Therefore mentioned, also you have God saying, an act of deception by Jehu was, quote, right in his sight, and all that was in his heart. In 2 Kings 10, 18 through 30. He says what Jehu did was right, and what was in his heart, and what was in his heart. What about that? Didn't Jehu deceive the worshippers of Baal? You can't say he didn't. Changing the subject. Again, where does it say there was no sacrifice of the heifer? You have yet to show where it takes place. And you have yet to show where it doesn't take place at all, okay? Verse 19 even says, quote, but Jehu acted deceptively, unquote, and God says it was right in his sight. What is your response to this? Where does God tell him to act deceptively? Jehu or Moses? See. If Moses, I said Exodus 3:18. If Jehu, he wasn't told to, but afterwards God flat out says what he did was right in his sight, and all that was in his, whether he ordered Jehu to do it or not, he approves it quite explicitly. What's this have to do with Samuel and the heifer? Look, you keep on changing the subject. You won't answer me as to how lying isn't bearing false witness. And you are now saying Moses was to lie in the passage in Exodus, have nothing to do with this heifer stuff. And I don't see it, nor do I see how Samuel was to lie. Again, I don't see how Samuel was able to lie with the heifer. Now you want me to check out Jehu when you won't answer me on the others? How come? Are you taqqiyaing here? Are you taqqiyaing me here? Guarding, possibly lying for Allah?